welcome to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past and talk about their impact and relevance today. I'm Tim Bongo Jr., and I'm joined, as always, by a man who knew Zelda would appear if he just let the kid wander around for a while.
Brett Duville. Hello.
We just discovered that you have not quite seen that cutscene.
I've not quite seen that cutscene.
But it's literally a line that will be uttered soon that I thought was hilarious because that was Ganondorf's plan that will be revealed to you in a second.
Yes.
He just wanted to let Link wander around for a while, and then that's what his plan was. So it's
like last week, I have one boss left to go to get to that.
You're almost there. Yeah,
I'm almost there. Yeah, I was a little stymied by one of the bosses, which we'll talk about because I know you found it difficult as well. So it will be an interesting topic of discussion. It was definitely, there's not a lot of stuff that's super time intensive, like do this thing really, really quickly, like real reaction type stuff. But that is one, and it's rough. It is rough. So. Yeah,
we definitely should break that one down because there's multiple things. I think, at least unless I wasn't doing it in certain way that they wanted us to do it, but there's definitely a bunch of problems with that boss in particular that we should talk about when we get there. But but you're almost there. I mean, once you take that one down, then we're caught up, and there's a bunch of things at play.
One of the nice things to learn was that you can do these dungeons in a different order. So,
right.
Although there is sort of a natural progression of difficulty, and I would say, narratively speaking, I think the Spirit Temple makes sense to be the last one, because that's the one that requires you to go back and forth, or to do it as both, it's the only dungeon for the sages that's true of. It is still possible to get to the very last room of one dungeon and be like, you know what, I'll come back to this and go do an entire other dungeon. And I think there's actually ways to get to that dungeon even before you have the long hook. Is that what it's called? The long shot.
To get to
cross the river. Yeah, I think it's possible with Epona.
But you need the long hook in the desert, I think, to get through.
You might be able to do that with just the hook shot.
Really? Yeah, I mean, maybe. I feel like there's got to be, but there's also a few places. Yeah, maybe they're short enough. But I feel like there's a few places in the dungeon.
Definitely places where I felt like I needed the boots. The other thing, though, is like you could go to all of these dungeons and get the special thing that you get in them, and then just leave and go do other dungeons, right? So I do think it's interesting too, that you can sort of get all the tools, and then I guess at that point you could just side quest like crazy. It's sort of interesting, like to see a speed run without like hacks, basically, bugs that are exploits, I guess you'd say. Yeah. I'd be really curious. Right. Yeah, there probably is.
I forget. But
something I don't know anything about. But it's probably just like no exploit or whatever. But like, can you imagine like working out the perfect order in which to do things, like 100%, 100% of the game like this, and not exploit it in any way?
Yeah.
What's the fastest you could do that? I'm sure I could just look that up, but just thinking about it, like the amount of work that would have to go into just figuring out what's the order is extraordinary to me. That's why it's a group sport, team sport, right? A bunch of people working on these things independently to try to figure out, what's the best order and why, right? And basically here, to have theories that they're testing. I don't know. I'm very curious about it. So, anyway.
Well, in a game like we've talked about with Nintendo's games, especially Zelda and in Metroid, a game with this structure that allows you so many different options versus like a speed run on a more linear game or something.
Sure.
You know, it's just like, you know, or even like a tradition, like a now sort of traditional open world game, which tends to be give you a lot more options to move through the world more quickly, whether it's fast travel or, you know, or flying or whatever. But here it's like there's explicit gates in. Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting. Like I think. Yeah, I'd have to think about it longer, but to your point, like you can definitely go in and get many of the. I see what you're saying. Yeah, you wouldn't have that. You wouldn't have as many hearts though, because you get the hearts from the end. But yeah, I mean, I guess
you could go get all the pieces of a heart, I guess, and things like that. Right? I mean, I think a lot of the tools give you the ability to get other things, right? So it feels like there'd be something there. So I don't know. It just was something I was thinking about because of the ability to do these things out of order, which is
didn't even occur to me because I mean the reason that I did them in the order that I did was mainly because what Navi's telling you, and she definitely is guiding you toward the Shadow Temple first.
Yes, but here's the thing. Once I had been into the Shadow Temple and then had to come out because I died and wanted to go refill my containers, if you actually look at the map at that point, it puts the pointer in the Gerudo area. You know, there's a little triangle indicator of where you're supposed to go next.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you about that. I mean, I haven't looked at the manual. In fact, I do have the manual now that I think about it because I have the original box for my N64 version. But also on the map, there's always the dots for locations are flashing if there's something to do there. Mm-hmm. You notice that? And so for me, the Lon Lon Ranch was flashing for, you know, most of the game because I finally did Epona this last session and then it stopped flashing. And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't remember that. I thought the arrow was where you are. Are you sure you weren't there when you saw the arrow? I thought the arrow was where you currently are located, but I could be wrong.
Oh, maybe that's it. Maybe I was running around I don't remember specifically when I did it. Maybe I was over there doing something in particular and just looked at the map and it caught my eye and I misinterpreted it. That's possible.
You could have been.
That's very possible.
You could be right. I just don't. That was my assumption when I saw the arrow, but I could be wrong.
So the blinking means that there's more to do there. That's good to know.
I think yeah. So and because I was kind of tracking it once I noticed that. So yeah, so once I noticed the flashing and that certain things were flashing and certain things were not, I kind of tried to figure out what it meant, and then realized, okay, all the things. This was like midway through the game. All the things that were flashing were things that seemed to be, you know, unfinished business, and so I tested that with Lon Lon Ranch specifically, and then once I don't remember if it was getting Epona or if it was. I think it was getting Epona, but it might have been. Getting Talon back there, you know, and sort of resolving that whole thing, you know, where you get the father back and Ingo.
Yeah, I haven't gone back there after I got Epona. I probably should do that. Maybe that's a thing I have to do.
I don't know if there's anything. I mean, I don't know if there's anything.
There's also sculptulas and things like that in there.
Yeah, so. For sure. Yeah, there are in both timelines. There are. Yeah, but anyway, yeah. So then I realized, and now that I've done the dungeons, like everything but the castle is you know, the castle is the only thing flashing on the map now. So now that
so it's not going to actually help you with the sculptulas.
No. It's just the main quest. Just the main quest stuff.
Just the main quest.
Yep. Okay. The only way to know the sculptulas is that when you scroll around on the map. Does that work
on the main map? That works on the main map as well.
It does as well. Yeah. I think I have.
All right. I don't think I have any then.
I think I have one section. I don't remember which one, but it works there too. And I have a few dungeons that I know are empty I've gotten all of them, but. Not very many things are
Yes, I only have a few. Although I've since found things that I think, oh, that's probably a thing I can use because I worked
Hmm.
out. There's
Yeah.
something that you haven't done yet that I don't want to say um, until we yeah until
A
that's done.
lot of the side quests have been stumpers for me for sure. Like I've dabbled. I know we're going to do next session. We'll spend, pretty much, that the time on that. Cause I imagine the castle's not that long, but maybe I shouldn't imagine that because I've thought that this whole time and each session's been way
Yeah,
longer.
I honestly don't remember that. I mean, I remembered once I got into generally once I get into the dungeons, I go, oh, that's right. Like I remember this general
Yeah.
thing. I might
Yeah.
remember the boss even. This time, definitely the witches. It's funny seeing the witches, and we'll talk about them specifically. But I saw the witches back in 1998 or maybe early 99 because Tim Schafer was playing Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time at work. And I happened to walk by there and I saw him in there, playing.
Hmm.
I probably had just finished like Grimm or something and just wanted to say, hey, I loved it or whatever. And he was in there playing that and he was playing that boss and trying to work out what to do. So that
How
has stuck
funny.
with me that whole time. Yeah. So.
Um, yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, you just told me that you could do those in any order, like that you didn't finish the boss in the Shadow Temple and decided to go do the other one. And it didn't even occur to me to even try that. I knew where the desert was on the big map, on the overland map, but I just sort of avoided it because I just was kind of waiting for somebody to tell me to go there, but I
Right.
didn't even attempt to try to go there. So
It's funny because
interesting.
it's unlike all the other places that you go to as a child. There's really no reason to go over there, except to sort of fill out the map. There's nobody sends you there.
Yeah.
There's nothing that pulls you there. And in fact, if you go there as a child, they prevent you from entering. There are guards and things like that, and the bridge is there, but you can't enter the space. It's really it's pretty interesting. So
And then you finding the for instance the carpenters,
yes,
that are there, which I thought was funny because you kind of wonder. I wondered where they went
right.
as an adult, and
I
I
kept
still
wondering if there was something you had to do to them to make them stop running and things like that, like
I tried I've tried all sorts of
bombing
things with
them.
them,
Yeah,
bombing, dealing like they seem to be running from one crate to another, sort of. And so I thought maybe it had something to do with the crates and, destroying the crates. The mask, they all have unique lines for the mask. Well, not all of them, the father, but it seems like there's something to do with them, though. It's
it really
totally
does.
like
It's
the way
very
they
distracting
presented it.
because they're running kind of they've got a very kind of garish animation for running as well. Like they're
Yeah.
flamboyantly, their heads are tossed back, their arms are
Yeah.
pinioning back and forth. And I mean, it's very different from, for example, there's a runner on Hyrule Field who's very
Yeah. I found him. Yeah. But I
very
don't
putt
know.
putt 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 putt. I mean, he's very uh, he's very rhythmic, in a way, and very contained, I guess is really the word I'm looking for. So it's just, I don't know. There's definitely some weird visual communication stuff there that you think that means something that it doesn't. That's right. I can imagine what it was like to play this game back then and not know and not be able to know, not be able
Yeah.
to find out.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Well, and I mean, the way that the father or the boss talks about them, he sort of presents it as a problem to
yes,
solve. You know
exactly.
what I mean? Like that they're lazy or whatever, and there's kind of like a thread there. But and then when you go in the future, they do eventually finish that one building because it's where the shooting gallery is. But I don't know. It's just funny what it's I'm just not, I've just been so conditioned, I think we all have to have a clear list of things to do,
Right.
and to know what, and in fact, in Breath of the Wild, they have adopted that. which is interesting. For the most part, all the side quests are things that will pop up in essentially a quest log. So it's pretty new for a Zelda game, but it is kind of nice to have that list, even if they're difficult to figure out. You know what is and isn't, especially in that game because it's so big.
Yeah, in this game, you really only know when you have done a thing, not whether you need to do a thing, right? So because it'll play a notification sort of sound like da-ding, or whatever it is that, when you in a number of the sort of quests, because I did some of the side quests because I was a little, part of the reason why I ended up doing that dungeon out of order was because I found that final boss very difficult. I died a couple of times there. I was like, well, I'm going to go do some other stuff for a while.
Yeah.
And then just come back. Once my brain has kind of incorporated that, I'll sleep on it, come back and finish it tomorrow. And so I ended up just going a lot of different places. And that's how I ended up discovering, I guess by mistake, that because I probably did look at the map while I was over there. I was just running everywhere I hadn't been and trying to see if I could figure out anything, planting seeds everywhere I could find to plant them. Just lots and lots of sorts of things, and did a lot of the mask series of tasks and the series of tasks that begins with the blue cuckoo. Or actually, I guess it technically begins with the cuckoo egg.
The egg, yeah.
You get before. So
yeah, gosh, I've shown that mask to so many people. I guess that there just must be something I'm not thinking of with who to start with that skeleton mask.
I think I'll give you a little hint. You may not think of it as a person.
Okay. All right, that's a good hint. Yeah, and it's just like the way that they've embedded side quests into the system. It's not like explicitly, they don't distinguish, right? Like they're just an activity to do.
Yep.
And it feels the game. I'm not to say that Link to the Past didn't feel this way, but I think that some of it for me is the representation in 2D and the abstraction that maybe doesn't feel the same, but this feels like a grand epic adventure. With
this game has way more world state, right? There's way more information that they're keeping track of in the world than they did in Link to the Past, right? Because here it could be that there's some state in which these you've dealt with these carpenters, right? These carpenter kids or something like that. They're, because that would just be independent of all the other various state, because you can do so many things in different orders, which felt less true in Link to the Past. Link to the Past felt a lot more linear. I don't know that it was, but it felt it at the time, and I'd have to really sort of go back and listen and see if we discovered anything about that. And so much more felt like it reset. Here there's actually just literal, we had already talked about how the dungeons have state. Once you've moved a block into a position, it's done. You don't have to do that again. Or if you've, started some elevator moving, for the most part, that's done. Like if there's a shortcut to the boss now, there's a shortcut to the boss now, so that you can go out and get those fairy bottles and what have you. So anyway.
Yeah. I think they're definitely expanding that space quite a bit from the two games. And for me, there's something about, like, I don't want to get sort of stuck in the rut of feeling like I don't appreciate 2D games as much as I used to. Because they're definitely classical in their own way, and they have their own charm, etc., and brilliance in the case of Link to the Past. But for me, something about the 3D representation of the game makes it feel more epic for me, and just kind of having the sense of traveling and that 3D camera and sight lines and the presentation and composition of that stuff. You know what I mean? It feels epic in that way. And the fact that I did leave the desert till the very end when they, and as the last sort of step, And then also going through the desert, like the process of that whole getting to the temple is quite arduous. There's a lot of steps, and there's the hideout, and then there's the desert itself where you can get lost, and it just feels like you're traveling. I mean, it feels like an early version of Breath of the Wild in that way, because that also feels just completely epic as far as traveling, more than a lot of games for some reason for me. And so, yeah, it's interesting now that I've been everywhere and kind of seen everything for the most part, the major areas. It feels like an enormous world, and I think back to everything we've done, as I think you should in a Zelda game, where you get this sense. I mean, they just, even in the save game, right? When you go back to load your save, and the save game has images of all of the main critical path collectibles you've gotten, right? The stones and the medallions. So you kind of see every time you load the game up your progress, right? You're like, oh yeah, I'm slowly filling them in, and now when I go to load my game, everything's filled in, and you feel like, wow, this has been a journey,
Right.
And they're just so good at that. It's just so it accomplishes that goal, and you just see so many. Obviously, they are influenced by other games for sure, but man, you just see so many influences in this game about, people pulling on things, even like whatever light puzzles, 3D light puzzles,
Sure.
or,
Yeah.
like in
the block sliding puzzle, or any number. I mean, block sliding puzzle, I'm sure was represented by sort of toys before then. I've certainly seen sliding block puzzles, right, that are 2D toys, literal physical toys. So I'm sure that's not unique to this, but it's still a sort of thing, sliding a thing around and being able to get to something you couldn't, or those sorts of weird orientation. There was also one, I think it was at Lon Lon Ranch, where it was like to get to some tunnel, you had to pull the blocks out.
Yeah, that's right.
And near the castle as well, right? There was a similar sort of getting the order right, because you needed to make sure you dropped one and then put the other one on top and stuff like that. So,
right, yeah, and they in Zelda and Link to the Past, they had representations of those same concepts. It's just this is in 3D now, so it's just again we've hit that multiple times on the series, but seeing that representation of them transitioning to 3D is quite interesting. And we talked about 2 years before this. Who knows if it was an influence, but Tomb Raider would have come out 2 years before this, where you see 3D representations of block puzzles and stuff, and so maybe there's a little bit of cross pollination there. But I feel like
they had to have seen that, right? I mean, they can't have been completely, especially it being a big PlayStation title, right? Which was also a big Japanese product. So even though Western, especially at the time, Western products did not tend to do well in Japan. I'm sure the biggest ones got over there. There were certainly some that did very well over there. I think Spyro is very popular. Spyro, or maybe it was Crash. I think Crash was really big in Japan. Crash Bandicoot.
Right.
Maybe not Spyro. Spyro was a little non-linear. I don't know. I can't remember. I remember hearing that at the time. Anyway, but I can imagine Tomb Raider had to have been something that these folks played, right? And took ideas from. Yeah. It was
and it was one of those. Tomb Raider was one of those games that definitely broke out, right? And it made a lot of. It had its own buzz around it, so I can totally see that. And I think we probably said this, but with Breath of the Wild, right? They've talked about the open world games that they played and influenced them, like Witcher 3 and stuff. So what happens. They're not all of their. They're not in a vacuum. But still, they're still the masters at putting this stuff all together. So. Let's see. So we should maybe hit the well, because you did the well.
I did the well last week.
Yeah, the funny thing about the well is you did, and you weren't sure at the time if it was going to actually be critical path.
Right. I couldn't remember. Once I got into the Shadow Temple, I went, oh, that's right. But when I was doing the well, I was like, God, I really don't remember this. I mean, that was part of it, was like, did I do this? Like,
Yeah.
I felt like I must have. Obviously I did, but it didn't lodge for whatever reason. I think it's just because it's fairly small, really. It's not I mean, it's sort of like that ice cave.
Yeah, it's like the ice. Yeah, totally. Ice cavern.
Ice cavern. Yeah, you know, there's not tons to it, although there are quite a lot of treasure boxes in there.
And I actually thought, to your point about like its size being small, like square footage, it was small, but I actually liked it quite a bit because I felt
it
like
recombines a lot. Yeah,
it's a good, yeah, it's a good example of them making a small space fairly dense with puzzle elements, because you're kind of moving through it, and they're, each of these sub dungeons tend to be they're trying to teach you a concept in maybe a sort of semi-safe way, and so this is obviously learning how to use the lens of truth. Yeah.
I mean, the thing about it, I think, that makes it so compact is that because you're learning that lens of truth, they're kind of teaching you different ways to be able to get into that central area, because there's a number of chests in the sort of main center of the main floor, where you can see them through the bars, which is another classic thing to do. Is like, here's the thing, you figure out how to get to it, right?
Yeah.
And so they're sort of teasing you, and in some cases you can sort of look and you see, and there's a door on the other side, so clearly I got to find a key. But there's others where it's like, I don't see there's no way to get through this gate doesn't have a door, so there must be some way to get to it from outside. So they're teaching you, yes, you need to make sure you're using the lens of truth everywhere. The unfortunate thing about that, though, is that it burns a resource, right? It burns your magic power, and that's a little sketchy, because there's enemies, and I'm sure plenty of enemies drop the magic. I know a lot of enemies drop the magic, so I'm sure it's easy to replenish, but it still feels counter, like, to the critical path, right? If you run out of this resource, you're kind of out of luck in that level,
right?
Unlike if you run out of bombs somewhere, you can. And I ran out of bombs in the Spirit Temple, and I was like, oh, I should have gotten bombs before I came in here. But then I had 30 something bomb chews. So, I was like, well, I have another type of bomb. It's more of a timing thing. It's a little weird. Oh, I also have the fire arrows. Like, there was a room where I needed to destroy one of those eye robot things with the lasers.
Mm-hmm.
And because there was a puzzle, so you had to kill it. And I'm sure you can remember the room I'm talking about. And I had no bombs at that point. That's always how I destroy those things.
Right.
And I was like, oh, what am I going to do? Like, I have to go out and come back and do this again. But I was like, oh, that's right, I've got this fire arrow. I wonder if you can use that. Or I wonder, oh, maybe I can use the bomb chew. And it started making me look at my inventory differently. But that is not something you can do with the lens of truth. You either have it or you don't. And if you can't use it because you're out of magic, that is a tough spot to be. So,
yeah, I was having the same thought. I had plenty at the time, but there's crossing the desert. One of the sections crossing the desert requires you to use it too, following that ghost, and
yep. Yeah.
How frustrating would it be to be in the middle of that, and run out of that resource before you get to across the dungeon or across the desert. And yeah, so it is a bit of a weird. I actually forgot that they even had the magic resource, and that multiple things pool into it. Even just using your spin attack, uses it. Fire arrows use it. There's lots of different things. All of obviously magic powers.
3 magic, yeah.
Yeah.
I got all 3 of those now. So.
Oh, you did? Okay, yeah. I was going to ask you because I still don't have the third one. No idea where it is.
I'm glad to have it, because I will probably use it for the boss of the Shadow Temple.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It's a short-term invincibility shield.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so you're trading magic for magic resource for invincibility,
right? Yeah, I don't know if it burns through the magic or if it's like you cast it in a last. I haven't cast it at all yet because I haven't needed to. But like, I'm not sure if it's like cast it and then
Tick down, or
it's up for 5 seconds, or if it's cast it and it burns through your mana, while you have it up, and you can. I don't know how you take it down, so I have to imagine it's the former.
Yeah,
that's like a 10-second shield or something like that, or whatever it is. But I will probably be using it in that room.
Yeah, the other thing about, so now I really do want to find that, but no idea where it would be. But the other interesting thing about the well, and then we don't spend too much time on it, but they teach you the concept of basically of walls and floors that that are illusions, for me at least, and I think it's probably common that this was how most people
by letting you fall through it. Yeah,
by letting you fall through it, right? So you're like, whoa, wait a second, what is this? And then you can obviously reset yourself by climbing back up, et cetera, and so you're like, interesting. And so it's just they're just really good at teaching you those sorts of concepts. And I guess in retrospect, all of these sub dungeons tend to be focused on that. And before the sub dungeons were kind of coming into play, they would usually have some element of either the current dungeon you're in, or moving toward, or something outside right near the dungeon to like, for instance, the diving puzzle, right? Like that was something that ended up being critical path, but it was teaching you the concept of diving, and then then you get the scale and you can dive further. So you're like, they kind of chain those together. We talked about the bomb thing in the past and had somebody write in on that.
Have you found a way to thaw the lake in the Zora domain? Like, I've wondered if there's a way to do that, or if it's just frozen now.
Actually, after I saved them, I haven't gone back after I've saved them, to be honest. So I don't even know what the status is of the village.
It was still frozen for me after you come back through there and you thaw out the king, but there's the store. I guess I could thaw out the store as well, but there's not anything else, I don't think.
But did you go back after you finished the water temple and saved?
Oh yeah. I went back this time, actually. I found a skulltula there. So.
Okay. Yeah. So no, I haven't gone back there. Yeah, that's an interesting question, because you'd think that it would return to normal in some way.
I'm wondering if I'm supposed to also thaw the store, if that's like the thing I didn't do or something. Like I'm not sure what it would be, but
yeah, I'll look. I would definitely want to go back and look into that. I'm going to scour, in the next session, or this one I actually did break up into a couple sessions because I figured it was going to be long. So I actually played a little bit last week, but to play the shadow, but so I wanted to ask you with the well, because you had gotten the lens of truth beforehand, and so when I finished what would have been the water temple? No, what would it have been? Yeah, I guess it was the water temple.
The water temple. Yeah.
Navi tells you, remember I was joking last episode that basically
who is someone who might know something about the other sages was an intro.
Yeah. She didn't even say man. It's just like, find somebody who knows.
Someone who knows something about the other sages. Yes.
So for me, what ends up happening is you go back to Kakariko Village, and a cinematic plays when I enter the village. That basically is a force thing. Does that play for you, or when did that play for you?
It played for me. I had already gotten the lens of truth. It played for me after I had done the water temple. Okay,
so you had because for me, well, I guess so. You would have gotten the same thing. I guess it doesn't matter. The darkness still can come from the well, even if you've been there already. Because for me, basically, I go in there and then it plays that cinematic. Sheikah's there and stuff, and then like the darkness kind of leaves the well.
Right.
And kind of moves back, I guess, to the graveyard or whatever.
Monster.
The smoke monster, exactly.
J.J. Abrams stole it straight from there.
Yeah. The smoke monster leaves. So it's sort of leading you to the well, you know what I mean, in a way.
Yeah.
But you had already been there, so yeah, I just was wondering.
Yeah, I still get the same cutscene and everything like that, but the fact that it comes out of the well, I'm sort of like, well, I already get the thing out of there. I mean, it does sort of nicely tie in because it's sort of a spooky place, right? Just with the illusions for one thing,
the
and all the
themes,
paintings
the
on the
themes
walls.
are the same. Yeah, the art direction's the same too. Yeah.
And then but then you've got that giant hand that's running around, which is, sort of creepy. Just inexorably racing around that square, box.
Which
you
hand
can
you
kill it. In the well.
about?
There's a ghost hand that runs around, or a skull. I'm sorry, a skull. I mean,
Oh yeah, right, yeah,
a really big skull, right? And,
yeah.
and it's
I didn't see it.
chasing you
I didn't
around.
even try to kill it. Yeah,
You can, you can. If you time a bomb with it, you can.
got it. Yeah,
But it just comes back if you ever, if you leave that room and that very big kind of area and then go somewhere else and come back in, it's just back. So it's kind of inexorable. And that's probably the thing that escapes. I don't know, maybe. I don't know. So maybe whatever animated the smoke. Like, I'm not sure.
Well, the effect that plays, which you will not have seen yet, the effect that there's an effect that plays when you kill the boss that looks like that same effect.
Okay.
So I just kind of assumed it was like the boss's
the boss's energy,
shadow,
is that
darkness.
darkness thing. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense. I'm not a huge fan of that boat.
No, I think the structure of the level of the temple and the lack of shortcut. They usually are better at shortcutting. They have one shortcut that gets you to the boat, but having to redo the boat, I had to redo the boat for whatever reason a couple times, and it felt like that shouldn't be necessary. That's what you're talking about, right? That big boat where exactly. Two guys jump on and you got to jump off, and I mean, I think overall I like the Shadow Temple, and I like the kind of using the effect of the especially I can imagine like this game in 1998 playing this game and that specifically that ability being used, being kind of a little bit of a mind-blowing thing, because I really like kind of, especially there's that one room with a bunch of pillars in it, when you have the lens of truth off and there's two of those the hand things that walk
right
around.
Yes, yeah,
and then you turn it on and you see their walls instead of pillars, and you kind of navigate through. That's just a great illusion.
Really good. I mean, it's basically I guess it's, what is it, maybe a stencil? I guess it's a stencil. That would have been that hardware, because it's a reality engine basically from Silicon Graphics. That's the chip. So I got to figure that would have been a really new thing at the time, right? I mean, you got to remember, like, back then we were just figuring out in graphics, like non-real-time graphics around then, figuring out how to do real-time reflections, of any kind, right? And just this, I mean, it's just kind of remarkable. And
they were pulling out all the stops.
Right? Yeah, and they were finding everything. Yeah,
like we already talked about some of the reflection stuff, or not the reflection, but the shininess, and the textures they were doing there, and translucency, and I would say like visual effects. They're definitely pushing hard in this one, and in fact, for me, which it probably doesn't for you, but the game slows anytime there's more than like 5 or 6, fairly complicated visual effects, which are essentially, animated sprites, are on screen. The game on the N64 bogs down, like it's bad. Like I'm talking like 15 frames, maybe. Like it's very noticeable, and
still better than some levels in Starfighter. So
but there you go. None of us have shipped. There's always those times, but I don't know, for first party. Like the funny thing is that every Zelda, I feel like every Zelda that ships on the first party machine as the first Zelda that ships on it tends to have performance, because Breath of the Wild also has slowdown on the Switch, because they just push it so far. They're just, trying to do more maybe than it can handle. But anyway, that effect was cool in the Shadow Temple, or just the in general. And I just get overwhelmed, like with the going back a little bit to the well and related to the lens of truth. Like when there was another moment when, I guess in that case, the way you start the temple is with a hook shot, which as a child Link you don't have. And the well you have to do as a child, right? Am I getting that right? That's
Yes.
Go back and do it that way. Yeah. So the fact that there was another moment when I got to a temple and I maybe it was the ice cavern or something, and I didn't have what I needed, and that sense of dread of like, oh no, where do I have to go to start this other journey to get the point,
Right.
the item that I need, and it's the same feeling that we're having with the secondary quests or the side quests, but those are optional, right? Like
Right.
I have a blue chicken. I have no idea what to do with the blue chicken. Not a big deal because I don't have to do it, but having that same notion where I'm like, oh, and so when I did get the lens of truth, I went directly to the temple, and then obviously you can't get in unless you have the hook shot. So you're like, okay, now I need to swap times and blah blah blah. But right. I did go to the temple first before the well, because the order of operations there is like, if you did it the way I did it, the cutscene plays, Sheikah comes in the town, gives you the song, and she literally says, or he literally says, go, you use this song to go to the temple. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. And I went, and it's like, I went to the temple and I'm getting that main room. I even sussed out sort of like, without the lens of truth, which doorway to go in for a couple of the steps, and the only thing you couldn't really do obviously is that rotating thing in the first room where you have to point it at one of the skulls.
Yep, the true skull, or whatever.
Yeah, so I could do that through process of elimination, I guess. But so I was like, okay, clearly I don't have what I need, and they give you clues about seeing the truth and all this stuff. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I just need to go check out this well, and so that's what it ended up being. But it just was a weird moment that they kind of were directing. They gave me this new tool, which was the song, to get me to a place I couldn't get to before. And then they kind of tell you about it, and then they don't really tell you about the well as strongly.
That's not new though, is it? Did you need to do that for? Maybe you didn't. I was thinking for Death Mountain for the Fire Temple. Maybe you. No, I guess you didn't. No, you didn't. There's another way there, right? You have to go through the king's room or something like that.
You can go that way, but you also can go from the top side. The equivalent there, obviously, is they let you go inside and give you a timer, right? Because you don't have the tunic. The tunic would have been the key in that case,
right?
And they do that with the ice one too. So it's not necessarily fundamentally flawed. It's just it was surprising to me, because actually I don't remember.
I wonder if in playtesting a lot of people found it earlier, because I basically found it from playing the song to that dude, and that is, by the way, a paradox. At times that's a little weird, and I was like, yeah, it is, because
it's a time. They're not thinking. They don't want you to think too hard about that one.
They definitely don't. Because I was like, wait a second. You taught me this song that I played for you, but I haven't played it for you. And
the funny thing is, the clue for that too comes from the future. So it's like,
exactly.
So it's like very, very funny. I mean, luckily it's that kind of, it's a I don't know, just a fun in games kind of game anyway. So you forgive that stuff. They're not trying to tell a time travel story per se. But it's pretty hilarious. Anyway, I would just say, you're right. I think in many cases, maybe people do get it first, but just a little bit weird. In those cases, I guess I've just been surprised if you were to draw the flowchart of the logic of the game out, and the things that you can do in different orders. I guess I'm surprised at some of the things they chose to allow to stay in a certain order. That they didn't solve. Maybe they just whatever they ran out of time or whatever. But I would have thought that they would have. It could be a little bit more airtight from a usability standpoint in some of these cases.
The other thing, I felt like she said something about needing to be able to see or whatever to do that, but that stuff leaves my head so fast.
They give you. Oh, you mean Sheikah when
some sort of hint that you'll need. I feel like she did, and I picked up on it because I went, "Oh, I have that." Right? I was like, "Oh, I guess I do need that," or something like that. I feel like I had that moment in that cutscene or whatever, or
maybe
something like
maybe
that.
I'm forgetting. Yeah, maybe.
But it's possible also you wouldn't pick up on it, right? If you didn't know, right? And that's a real danger. And
that's kind of what I mean, right? It's like
right?
You're putting
it's like you
lot.
wouldn't you'd have to read, and of course in translation besides, it makes it even harder to pick that up. Because who knows how much more precise it was if they had more.
Putting a lot of stock in the clues being interpreted correctly, and I think in the future,
it's a developer blindness, right? I mean, it's very hard for us to see that stuff because we do know the answer, right? I mean, I run into this all the time, and I'm sure you do too. And DMing, where it's like, just would you just do the thing?
Yeah, right.
Why are you spending so much time on this? Just do the thing, because like that it's the here's the lock. Just put the key in it, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's funny. Speaking of lock and key, you jogged my memory on one of my notes. Remember in our our discussion. Oh my goodness, I'm blanking on his name for Eternal Darkness. Who was the guest we had on? He was
yep.
Darn it.
I have forgotten. I will look it up though while you go ahead.
Anyway, he brought up that one of the pieces of feedback that they got from Miyamoto that dictated some of how they end up using their spells for puzzles. Remember he said something like you need more things to be able to be keys for locks or whatever. I mean, he said it more eloquently, but you need more keys.
Yeah.
And you take that filter and you put it over this game, and it's like, this whole game is just a bunch of keys. Yeah. Like literally, like even weapons can be keys, even shields can be keys, boots can be keys, and it's like, they're just abstracting another layer on top of a key, and you look at
it was Brad Furbinger.
Brad. I'm so sorry, Brad, not that he's listening, but I'm so sorry that I blanked on your name. But yeah, Brad said, that one of the big pieces of feedback that Miyamoto gave him was, you need more keys, you need more things that can be keys. And so it's like, you see that ethos kind of
keys that aren't keys, right?
Keys that are keys. That's better put, and that's the better quote. But and that's exactly what Zelda is, basically just keys that aren't keys. So it's funny. And speaking of which, in the Shadow Dungeon, you get finally the third set of boots, right? That allow you to, it's just a represented way, not represented, but a newly presented way of having a key, but in a cool way, because you're floating on the air and and you're sliding around, and it's kind of it's presented in a cool way, but it's really
I was kind of surprised. I was expecting it to be more like hidden paths, right? That you would have to walk across. In fact, that's what I expected it to be, even in that main room, because of course I've forgotten what gadgets, right? And then I got the boots. I was like, oh, of course, right? And
right.
You do end up using that in some other places as well. And it's probably,
and they do both in there, right? They do have rooms where they
do have both. In fact, they have a room, I think it's in there. It might be in the
level,
where you have to use both. I can't remember which.
It's leading up to the boss, I think. Right?
Okay, that's right. Right, yeah. You have to run across spaces and then also be able to see them. That was
well, let's talk about the boss really quick. You haven't finished it yet, but you know what you.
I know what I have to do. Right, you have to you freeze both the hands, and then that basically makes it get into position and ram you with its eye, and you have to
Yeah.
shoot the eye, right? So
Yeah.
I know what to do, but actually executing that and not losing a ton of health. I was trying to do it a lot with the long shot and not the bow, because I've only got, so many arrows, 30 arrows.
That's what I did. I did combo it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's harder with the long shot because the long shot tends to,
Timing.
timing, and it also kind of moves on a certain trajectory that sometimes misses the hands. So it is,
and you have to wait for it to return before get hit more. And, so
I definitely was not elegantly. I did not defeat it in an elegant manner. You have to use the. So the way I did it, at least, is I would shoot the eye with the arrow and then run up and hit it with my sword. You basically stun it with the arrows, is how I did it. So I don't know if you probably can just keep hitting it with the arrow if you want to too, but I saved arrows that way too. But anyway, the challenges with that. So first of all, it's a big boss with these big hands it's literally, I think the name of it is Bongo Bongo or something. And it's hitting
Phantom something, Bongo Bongo. I'm like, oh boy.
Yeah. So every time the hands hit the drum that you're standing on, you're bounced in the air. And so the combination of you have no control over being bounced in the air. It's kind of on this rhythm, right? So it's like you're constantly having control taken away from you, which hasn't happened too often in the game with bosses.
I wonder, did you try putting on the heavy boots?
No, did you? That's a good idea.
I didn't, because I only tried the boss twice before. I was like, I'm going to come back to this later, because I was.
Yeah, you should try it. The funny thing with the witches, I did try putting on the other tunics to see if fire. Yeah. If the fire one would not, but it didn't work.
I already had the fire one on, and I knew. Yeah. I learned pretty quick.
So that's a good. If that works, let me know for sure, because if that works, I would be very impressed, because I'd be surprised. But yes, I mean, you lose control over your footing and thus the camera. You have 3 different things that you're trying to Z target, together. And then the camera for me was inevitably not facing the direction I needed it to be,
right, to hit the eye.
To basically lock onto the eye to hit it. So
and I mean, the other part of that is, of course, because the things move very fast, and because it's large, it has to get far away, and it gets out of Z targeting range. So it's just like this. It's really pushing the limits of the ability to do those things, and I'm sure you're ending up having to turn the camera really fast, as fast as you can, to try to lock onto the thing. I mean, that's what I was doing. And by the time I'd get there, I'd misfire the bow. I'd do it too early or too late, or, whatever. I wouldn't lock on when I could, or the thing would be on top of me. I mean, it just was. And
it moves towards you too. So it's like, as it gets closer, it gets out of camera range, or kind of, gets out of camera view, not range. Right. Well, then also imagine doing this with one stick, which is what I'm doing. So what I end up having to do is I'm hitting the Z button as I'm turning Link a lot to try to reorient the camera behind him. So my version of right stick aiming is turning him and then spamming the Z button to try to get behind him. Too. Oh, okay, okay. So
GameCube controller is the same as far as that. Like it controls the same way.
You can't with the C stick. You can't control it doesn't have right.
No, that's where the bindings are for items.
Oh, okay. So it is the same. Okay.
Yeah,
so then.
Yeah, it's just brutal. It's just brutal.
Yeah,
there's no difference in the control. I mean, the controller's itself different, but the way the game controls is no different.
Is the same. Okay. Yeah. Got it. I think in my head I was always thinking that GameCube players get right stick camera control.
No,
but that's not the case. Yeah. That would break it. That would break too much probably anyway.
Yeah.
So I mean I think you put it well. They're just stretching the bounds of what the systems can do in this particular boss's case. So on the other hand though, I think the witches actually were pretty well designed, room wise, well designed. The patternization was well designed, and you're making like the two phases. I know we're jumping ahead, and we can skip some of the maybe to it, but the two phases I think taught the first phase taught you well about the concepts, and then the second phase kind of up the ante with the bosses on kind of charging up. I didn't quite get the charging up your shield multiple times though. I couldn't really, there's not a lot of signaling. I don't know if I missed something, but there wasn't a lot of signaling with, okay, once you have your shield charged up once, what do you do? You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't sure, like, am I supposed to hit them with my sword then, and so having it, and then I kind of accidentally had it hit a second time and then had the audio change. So then I knew it kind of was charging up even more. And so there's some clues there. I think that there's some things they could have improved upon that aren't just trial and error, but overall, I think that was a quite well designed boss.
Yeah, I like that boss a lot. It's memorable. I love the reflecting the beams. The one thing I'm not crazy about is there something you can do with the ice with the second form? Like, I think you just have to dodge the ice, right?
Either one. If you charge the shield,
you can charge either.
Oh,
okay.
You just need to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay. You just need to make sure whatever one you're charged with obviously isn't hit with the opposite one, because it'll.
Right. That's what happened. That's what happened to me, and that's why I thought, oh, okay, it's just fire I do this with.
Got it. Yeah.
So
I can totally see that.
Yeah. I misunderstood what they were telling me there to be, oh no, do the fire, then dodge the ice. And that's not what. Yeah.
If you charge up with ice 3 times, then you kind of shoot a ice beam at her, and she gets knocked down. So
okay, so it's probably that battle's probably a lot easier than I made it, because I mean it's really easy to dodge the ice as well. I was just like watching what she does. Okay, here comes the ice wand. Move, start jumping. She was Z targeted. Although to jump to her on one of the pillars,
that was finicky.
Dropping the Z targeting. As soon as she would fall, I'd drop it and I'd run towards her, because I'd face her and drop it and run at her and jump, because the auto jump would be fine. But yeah, the first time I did it, I fell. I was like, oh no, that's not cool. She's kind of right on the edge there. So it's like, what I think I was doing is I actually fell multiple times, because I think you kind of bump into her or something, and then it pushes him off. So I didn't, something weird was happening there. So actually I did quite a bit of damage with the arrows, fire arrows to her. Oh, interesting.
And then I kind of ended up using my sword at the end. But I mean, it's just like, you just see them. And we've talked about this with Mario bosses as well. You just see them progressing with their boss designs over time. Just getting better and better and better. And I would say with Breath of the Wild, you kind of start seeing the apex of a lot of their sort of rules, if you will. That this game, not again, I hadn't finished this game, but you see a lot of for 3D Zelda, you see all the underpinnings of their rule sets in this game where they discovered it, and for Mario 64 as well. And it's just kind of cool to go back in time and see where sort of a lot of their concepts began. Obviously they began in the 2D ones, but I mean, from a 3D perspective, you see where a lot of it began in this game. I mean, like, oh, okay, that's where that came from. That's where this, that or the other thing that you see in Twilight Princess, or you see, Wind Waker or whatever. And so this really, I mean, we were kind of, obviously I had my little lore diversion, whatever. My little big one, whatever, second episode or something. And we were joking about that as a lore diversion, but even to totally stretch that even further, if Ocarina of Time is this sort of fracturing of the timeline from a narrative standpoint, it's also kind of this genesis point for design for them for 3D Zelda. There's like a lot of the blueprints are here, and they just kind of keep expanding and refining these sorts of blueprints from this game. They learned a lot in this, and I just, because I hadn't finished
it carried them a long way. I should point out that Nolan Filter, or Reverend Q, corrected me on Twitter that Skyward Sword did not have the purchasable, or rentable rather, I should say, tools.
Okay.
So I haven't played that one. I was remembering there being something about that one that people didn't like, and that was not it. And he did kind of clear that up for us. So I want to throw that out
Got it.
to No Filter.
So then Link Between Worlds was the first experiment with that, and that was, again, I think an early experiment that ended up progressing toward Breath of the Wild. And I was also reflecting on the length of these temples, by the way, and it is pretty traditional Zelda length for the most part. But I think one of the things that I've really enjoyed about Breath of the Wild, you have the divine beasts, of course, which are conceivably, you could call them sort of the new versions of the macro temples. But they're really kind of their own. They're very weird. They're not the same as a temple. But obviously there's the shrines. And the thing I loved about the shrines in Breath of the Wild is that they were more bite-sized. I feel like it was like I got the feel of revelation that I get from these temples in Ocarina, but I'm not devoted to them for so long, and as you progress through the game, the ones that you can get to become harder over time. And so the progression that you get inside these temples is still felt, but I don't know. I just like kind of getting in and out and then doing like 3 or 4 shrines in the time that I would do a temple, but I'm not committed to them for so long, and they're not so linear, if that makes sense. So I think that's kind of a nice natural progression. Though I know a lot of people complained about not having traditional temples in Breath of the Wild too. So
yeah, I would say I felt more into that camp. I really like this style of dungeon design, although they do have the beasts, right, which are more this, and there's not usually a ton of them, obviously, right? I mean, there's quite a few in this one, right? I mean, especially if you count these sort of lead up ones as well, the sort of,
I mean, there's 8 really, right? Yeah, I mean, there's 8 main ones, and then 5.
9.
Yeah, I mean, we're counting the castle, you mean, or do you mean with the lead up?
Castle.
Yeah, 9 total, and then what? 3 or 4
additional
side ones. Yeah. Though the one in the hideout, the thieves' hideout, seems to be maybe not as big, but it actually is. There's more to it than I thought there was going to be. There's actually quite a bit going on in there. So I didn't finish it, but I left because I didn't want to waste the time. But I'm going to go back to it. So there might be kind of another hidden one in there. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I definitely know what you mean from the linear, like the traditional Zelda temples or dungeons have something going for them.
I think it's just the sort of the substantial win you feel, right? I mean, it's partly the as you keep calling it, the object oriented quest design. It's like, oh, I got the medallion, I got the stone, right?
Yeah.
There's that, right? It has that going for it that that you don't get with the shrines. And part of that is that, of course, you have to find all those shrines as well, right? There's a whole bunch of them, and they're not always obvious where they are, right? So there's also just like my OCD gets crushed by Breath of the Wild because there's so many things, right? And they only give you 3 or 4 map markers or whatever it is. Don't correct me, I don't remember, but like you don't have enough to track all the things that you can see at a given time, and that's really your only mechanism to remember them, unless you're trying to keep some kind of accurate map. But the game is so large, like I mean,
it is an OCD.
It hurts my brain.
It is a nightmare. I mean, it's open world in that
plus 990 whatever,
Yeah.
seeds.
Yeah, the seeds are a whole nother thing. Yeah. Yeah, you get way more ability to mark things than you remember, though. It's not 4, but
whatever. I mean, but it's not. It still felt like not enough, is what I remember. Like,
I think it's like 100. I mean, it's quite a few. I mean,
is that really true? Maybe more were added with a patch.
Maybe could be. Yeah. But I mean, I understand what you're saying.
I definitely remember being like, there's only a handful. So that feels like something they may have added.
They could have. They could have. Yeah, they could have totally. But yeah, I mean, is there anything in the Spirit Temple that you want to talk about specifically? I mean, I liked it overall. The boss
I like the idea of coming to this same dungeon both as a child and
oh yes, of course, we have to talk about that. That's huge.
That's the one thing that I really thought was really impactful, and what makes this a natural culmination for the dungeons. Like, even though with the prior one, with the Shadow Temple, you have to do something as a kid and something as an adult, it doesn't feel of a piece, right? And especially considering I did them in a different order or a different timing than you did them, right? Yeah. I had already had the Lens of Truth and showed up, and you didn't, and had that weird kind of like, what am I supposed to do moment. Yeah, but for this, it was really, really nice, and then she's very clear about it, I guess she basically tells you, hey, you're gonna have to, here's the song, you're gonna have to use this, and you'll be able to travel here as a kid or something like that. I was like, oh, that's so cool.
There's also those things on the wall inside that you can read that tell you,
right? And they will also tell you that, yeah, you'll need the silver, the silver or something, and the, I mean, we find it pretty soon, but yeah, I really love that whole, and I'm sure there's more commentary that's meant to be there of that, that some of the challenges you meet as an adult you need to prepare for as a child or something like that. And I don't know, I'm sure there's something that's trying to say, because that theme kind of resounds through everything. But just from a structural point of view, it feels really culminatory to have that happen that way. And that honestly my favorite thing about it. I mean, I think the dungeon's fine. Otherwise, like, I don't find it. I like it fine. Like, there's not, I don't think it's amazing. It's probably not my favorite, but it's definitely not. It's far from my least favorite. So,
yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the side rooms were kind of in the medium, the sort of middle for me when it comes to ranking. But I do also always tend to appreciate, which I think we probably talked about this with Tomb Raider and other games. And in fact, I often would try to do it with my own level design in the past. I love levels. I love dungeons and temples like this that have a central room that you return to multiple times and kind of ends up culminating in the final exit to the boss in this case, right? So that big, and in fact, the temple itself is called the Desert Colossus, and so it happens in two ways. One, the front facade, when you come out as a kid, you come out right outside finally. And you find the chest out there that gives you the gauntlets, and you see this, the that's not facade. What is the carving in the rock, right, of the statue that's out there. And then as an adult, you come out on the other side, right? And the other chest is there where you get the mirror, the shield mirror. So you it's a really cool returning to that section. And then inside you have the boss, the boss entrance room, which is the big statue that eventually you're kind of moving all around from both adult and child Link. And then you finally descend on that elevator, right? That gets you right in front of the face. And then you have the light puzzle that you've kind of navigated this light through quite a few rooms to get down into that, and then you use the light to break through the face. That whole sequence was super cool to me, because you have this memory of like, oh yeah, this is the room. Oh, I know exactly where I'm going to go, and then you descend into it as kind of a surprise, and then but otherwise, I mean, the rest of it was fine. There wasn't any I think the only other note I put down is, because this is obviously a late game temple, there's quite a few, they have quite a few combinations of tools that you're using in this dungeon, right? You have to go back to, well, at least the way that I did. I don't know, some of them might be optional ways to use it, but you're using you have to use your the floating boots, I forget what they're called, in a couple places. I think you have to use a lot of your, fire arrows if you want, in that case. So those are the easier ones. You can use Din's fire as well. I don't know. It just seems like there was a lot of culmination of a lot of the tools you've had up to this point. And you get 2 tools in the dungeon because you get the gauntlets and
Right.
and so the other note I had is at this point in time, Link feels super, powered up.
Right.
He's actually wearing the gauntlets as an adult. You see them on his hand, which I think is cool. And
I do like that you use so many tools. And in fact, there was a tool in here that you haven't figured out yet that I got to use as well, that I was just like, man, it's just like everything in this one dungeon, because you do it both as a child and as an adult. So you have to use the boomerang, you have to use any number of things for the combat. And then, like I said, I was also using the bomb chews, because I had run out of bombs, and like it just was pulling out all the stops. So I do really appreciate that about it too. And the fact that it delivers 2 more tools at the same time is also really, really nice.
They're asking a lot of the player to kind of combine all that stuff together, which is cool.
Right.
It's good.
Yeah. And I wanted to say that that's probably a thing I noticed the most, that description of coming into a room multiple ways and like progressing it is something, you see in Uncharted today, right? Or whatever,
right.
Anything like this is going to have that kind of feeling. So that's a huge impact on 3D level design. I think this temple in particular feels that way.
Well, and I think the reason that I brought up Tomb Raider is I'm almost positive I brought the same topic up then, because that happens multiple times in that game, right? There's the Sphinx specifically level in Egypt, remember, where you come out and you see the Sphinx, and then you end up crawling kind of all over it and kind of coming out different exits and entrances, and and that those sort of set pieces as level, I think, and again, I'm not necessarily giving that to Tomb Raider as the sole credit, but I think that there's also another example I was trying to think of in that game. But anyway, the Sphinx is or the Colosseum, maybe another example, right, where you're in this Colosseum and you kind of come in and out a bunch of different exits and entrances, and it's just I love that. I love set piece level design like that. That's actually not just for visuals, but it's part of the actual level design. Yeah,
that's one of the things that I think you see less than you should in first-person shooter design. Though it was something we talked with John Romero about with his Sigil project. Or maybe it wasn't Sigil. Maybe it was. Now I can't remember if it was Sigil or something else. But the very complicated way you could re-enter the same space. You had actually pointed out and maybe talked to him about it in the interview. I can't remember. Yeah, it certainly came up in our discussion. So it's
there's a couple. I don't remember what level it was, but I don't think it was in Sigil. I think it was in the main game. There's that one,
maybe late in the game or something.
Yeah, late in the game. There's a big room that has like a I think lava in the floor, and there's these pillars, and you kind of you're kind of going across the room, and then you go around the room, but it's this central room's kind of always there. Yeah, I think that is a lost art form in shooters specifically, because I think shooters have just become so either they're open world like a Far Cry, or they're linear. There's like nothing. There's very few things in between. I guess I would say Dishonored maybe is a good example of a modern. Right, modern.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair. That's true. But
But
they're
maybe
trying
not
to
a set piece.
open space, but it's not sort of set piecey. It's more like you're now in this neighborhood, right? So it's it's because it wants you to be able to see the clockwork more than it is like showing you, oh, here's another cool way you're coming into this interesting space. But anyway, we're definitely digressing. I think at this point we should probably turn to feedback. I was thinking about whether we want to dial that back, because I just put 2 emails this time, but they're very long. So maybe we'll even just cut back to do just 1 email, and you can do that 1 review. I do still have the singing review, which I forgot about until today. So I again have to put it off. So a little post-Christmas, pre-New Year's gift, if I can remember it. I've had a lot on my mind. I've had a lot of other things to think about this past week, including what I'm going to do for your D&D group. So it's been a lot.
We'll get to it. It'll be a nice.
I just don't want it to. I don't want to lose sight of it. I don't want that person to feel badly, because I appreciate the effort, because it's very well done. So I'm looking forward to it. I just don't know it well enough, so I can't just do it off the cuff. That happens every now and again. Nobody ever sends me just like, here's a Christmas carol that I know by heart. It's
Isn't
always
that,
some song I've never heard, and I'm like, oh man.
isn't that sort of part of the fun though of probably why they do that, to make your
Yeah, it might be fun for them. I mean, I think about how many times I listen to the Pokemon rap or the Pokemon song, I should say. It's not really rap. I want to be the very best. That one I had never heard that song before, and had to learn it. Anyway, let's turn to reviews. We have one here that I sent over to you. Thank you for that. It came in through the Apple Podcasts infrastructure. Thank you for the review. Let's hear it.
Okay. Subject: best video game podcast around. Wow, that's a nice subject. From Tylenardo.
If that is your real name, Tylenardo.
Tylenardo. Okay, yeah, I think that's right.
It's like the copier guy kind of came up with that one.
Tylenardo. Nice.
Yeah. Tyler man.
Maybe it's a Leonardo reference. Maybe he's a Turtles fan, maybe, or an art fan. So let's see. I started listening with the Half-Life series and have since went back to listen to all the back catalog and have immensely enjoyed it. It's great going back and reliving old favorite games and hearing interesting facts about how they were made. The interviews with other game devs are my favorites, as I love to hear the inside stories from people who built these games. Super excited to finish the Link to the Past series, as it was the first video game I ever beat as a kid. I loved it so much, I immediately started playing again from the start. Nice. Yeah, I wish we could get more Japanese developers on. It's just very difficult to figure out. So, thank you, Tylenardo. That is a very nice review. We really appreciate it.
Very much appreciated. Thank you. And it's very humbling. I have an email here, and I think we'll just wrap up with an email sent to devgameclub@gmail.com because, like I said, this brings out a lot of email and tends to be long emails as well. This is Ocarina of Time and Time Again. When magic filled the air, 'twas in the darkest depths of Death Mountain, I met a Zelda so fair. It's from Billy, the Second Quest. Hey, enjoying the current series on Ocarina of Time. It's kind of amazing how strongly moments in that game can come back to you, even if you've only played through it in its entirety once, as in my case. Me too, Billy. One facet of the game I found interesting when it first came out was how they hid the game being simultaneously both prequel to A Link to the Past and essentially a 3D remake of that game. The SNES title's early coverage established its nature as a prequel to the original NES games pretty quickly by comparison. It isn't really until you get to that midpoint in the story, where the sages are brought in, that you begin to realize that you're essentially playing out the opening backstory to A Link to the Past, connection Nintendo would later emphasize when they re-released A Link to the Past on the GBA and changed the original references of wise men to sages to make them align better. I've always found that, quote, you're playing a prequel to a prequel, there's a remake of that prequel angle. Interesting. Not one you see too often. It's actually something that contributed to me turning away from the game for a short period of time, because there was a deja vu sense of, oh, this is a good conversion to 3D, but I've played this game before. I would roughly compare it to watching the original Toy Story after having grown up watching the almost identical Jim Henson's The Christmas Toy. Interesting. I don't think I've ever.
Wow. No, I didn't know that.
That's a deep cut for me. I don't know that one. The shift in music from the sweeping, epic John Williams-like fanfares of the 2D games to the more ambient Eastern tone of Ocarina of Time was a bit of a turn-off as well, though Gerudo Valley was and always will be catchy. Yeah, I like that one too.
Oh, yeah.
However, I eventually came to embrace it as part of the Zelda musical spectrum and can at least appreciate its integration into the gameplay. That may sound more negative than I intend. I actually do like the game quite a bit, and running it a bit long. Yes, and we're at the halfway mark, Billy. But I think that context helps. That context helps emphasize that, even for someone who wasn't wowed by the game out of the gate, that its enduring charm and gameplay still produces moments that leave an impression on you decades later. Somewhat on the subject of music, though, I will definitely appreciate the game's marketing campaign, introducing me to the Conan the Barbarian score as paired with the famous whilst thou soar, whilst thou soar or whilst thou suck TV ads. And he's got a link for that. So I will have a link to the YouTube video in the show notes. A relationship with the franchise that would continue when the music would return for the first Twilight Princess teaser trailer at E3 2004. And he's got that link in there as well. So you will see those if you look at the show notes. As a note, correction, expansion on the lore front, the Sheikah are the race tribe of whom Impa is a member. Zelda takes on the persona of Sheik. It is Impa on the horse carrying Zelda during the nightmare.
Right.
cutscene.
Yeah. I just realized that because I've finished, I've seen some cinematics that Brett hasn't, and then that dawned on me that I had that wrong, or one of us had that wrong. Yeah.
Impa herself originates back to the storyline of the original NES games. She doesn't appear in the SNES or GB games, where in the far future in relation to OOT, she's now an old woman whom the traveler Link saves from the forces of Ganon that are chasing her. She then tells Link of Zelda's capture and how she hid the pieces of the Triforce, etc., the titular Legend of Zelda, before questing him to save her and Hyrule, where the game then begins. Yeah, that's interesting too to me. Like this ties back to that stuff.
This thing is, oh my gosh, this lore. Zelda may now take on a whole, like, it may be up there now for me as far as the most complicated lore of any franchise. I have some other examples that I won't name.
Now that they've turned it into Star Wars Legends and it's a different thing, I think that's true because now Star Wars canon is almost comprehensible.
Yeah, well, for now. Give it 10 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, how many TV shows did they just announce? Anyway, back to Billy. The manual backstory to Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, once again heavily features Impa as she identifies the meaning of the Triforce symbol that appears on Link's hand in the story, as well as revealing to him the hidden chamber where the sleeping Princess Zelda, an ancestor to the one in the original game, rests. It's the first time there is mention of Impa's ancestors/family looking after the royal lineage and is, in essence, the publication of the origins of the Sheikah themselves, which would result in Ocarina of Time's Impa ace acting in that role. Also worth noting that it was originally implied that Impa, like Ganon, was possibly the same long-lived character throughout most of the games and not a reincarnation or ancestor character like Link or Zelda, though this has probably been discounted by more recent games. Lastly, you might find it entertaining to check out the audiobook, How to Defeat a Demon King in 10 Easy Steps. It's basically a lightly comedic deconstruction of the RPG genre and the Zelda cyclic mythology in particular. It's about a character who wants to defeat the evil Demon King and save the world herself by gaming the RPG character class system she exists in because she doesn't want to wait decades for the legendary hero to reincarnate. And yes, of course, there's a water temple. Okay.
Wow.
Enough for me for now. Yeah, that does sound cool. How to Defeat a Demon King in 10 Easy Steps. I'll have to see if it's a book. I'm more of a book person than an audiobook person. I love a codex. Okay, enough for me for now. When you bring up Zelda, I'm going to ramble on. West. So
love it.
I appreciate it. This is, like I said, this is a series. This is a platform and a series or series of platforms that tends to bring out the long nostalgic emails and lots of questions and thoughts. So yeah. But a lot of good stuff in there. I was surprised to see more lore bombs when this email just like, and here's other ways it all connects together. That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah,
I mean, I could sort of see doing that. Like, I could imagine like going and making a new game and being like, what can we pull in? You know, what do we? And so they basically decided at the time it was a prequel. So.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm probably going to get this wrong, and somebody will write in about it or something and correct me. But I don't think Impa is in Breath of the Wild. Am I forgetting? It's very. Oh wait, no. Is it the old woman? No, I think that's somebody else. Anyway, I'll have to look it up. But yeah, it's interesting what they chose to focus on and not focus on in the future. And again, I still think
she is a playable character in Age of Calamity.
Yeah, that's the new game. Yeah, so.
Yep.
but but maybe she'll be in the sequel or something. But I still, as much as I created the lore bomb,
she's the chief. She's the chief of something. Sorry, I'm looking this out. Yeah, she is the old woman.
Is her name Impa? Yeah, I couldn't remember her name. I mean, it makes sense that she would be Impa, but the old woman she gives you. So that's dumb of me because you meet her pretty quickly. But anyway,
oh yeah. I got that far. Yeah, so it is pretty quickly because I got that far. I remember the research lab. Yeah,
Cocorico Village. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, it's
She founded it.
What's that?
She founded it.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, and it's again another correlation to everything. I just like until obviously I'm guilty of being the first one to drop the lore bomb in this series, but when I look back at the sort of my hope that I think I mentioned that somebody else who wrote in mentioned with we'll link to the past, is that this whole franchise works so much better if you just go by the fireside storytelling. Like and not only does it work better, I just think it is better. It's like it makes it transcend all this lore nonsense. It doesn't make it into Star Wars. You don't want it to be Star Wars.
No,
because I think its style and its motifs and its themes and its ethos is all about that sort of storytelling, thing. So I don't know. Yeah.
The other thing too, honestly, I think it's partly because it's so, I don't know, like there's a weird thing about Star Wars is that it's kind of too specific to become that in a way. You know what I mean? Like you couldn't imagine, I don't imagine that becoming Fireside Stories. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas this is sort of like, oh, you pull out some of these ingredients, you put in some of those ingredients, and now it's a totally different new story. You just use some of the same character names and their archetypes and whatever. But I don't think you could do that with the hyper specificity of something like Star Wars. So that's a lesson for those of you out there wanting to build huge universes that you can do, dozens of games off of. That's how you start.
Well, and I think also because they have repeated themes over and over again, right? With Zelda, and they have not created a universe as much as they have created one land in Hyrule, and that the similar things happen every time. So you kind of like, it's like mythology. It's like the structure of mythology, and Star Wars is world building. It's, it's characters and planets and events that have a linearity to them, anyway, this don't get me started on this, but
no, I'm sorry I brought it up. Very sorry, believe me, the last couple of minutes
I know. Yep. So we're gonna pick up. I mean, we're gonna probably have to do like an email episode, right, or something.
We're gonna have to do a catch up. It sort of depends where we are. Yeah, I don't want to go any longer because folks are listening to this Christmas morning, and they want to get back to their families.
Sure.
I will.
Speaking of which, though, I didn't mention this in pre-show, but I am going to drop this on you now. We do have a present for the listeners that I do want to announce that we didn't discuss ahead of time, but what it is.
Please.
I'm going to jump in and just announce it now. The great Mark Garcia, who is a listener, fan, friend, also an artist, graphic artist and artist who did our 200th episode poster that you may remember if you are a close follower of the podcast. A wonderful poster chronicling basically all the games we've played throughout the 200 episodes and for whatever 4 years that was. We actually asked him to do a new logo for the podcast, which as a Christmas present for listeners who celebrate Christmas, we are going to add into the canon of the podcast, the lore canon of the podcast. It's going to be new logo. It's way better than it's a professional graphic artist doing a logo versus Tim doing his own logo with impact font in PowerPoint,
which I then recreated in Microsoft Paint.
Oh yeah, great. Okay, wonderful.
It wasn't big enough.
Yeah, wonderful. So
big enough for Apple. They were like, no, it's got to be much bigger than that. I was like, okay, I guess. Gee, I wonder. Oh, that looks like impact.
Yeah, nope. So yeah. I mean, maybe as you know, we had a bit of this controversy when we changed the theme song as well. Like people grow accustomed to things, and maybe you're a lover of that original ridiculous logo, but we're evolving, we're moving forward, and we're trying to be a little more professional. And I thought it would be awesome to ask Mark to do it. So Mark did one for us. So Brett will put up the new artwork, at least for the I don't know, the website, and I think we have to figure out how to put it in all of the different apps and stuff that we do use. But
yeah, that might
take some time, but we'll put it up on Twitter and stuff, and I
have to go download it and stuff. You'll have to I didn't know this was coming, so you're gonna have to send me an email with the link this time.
I'll send you the information. Yeah,
I don't know how it got to me before, but
no, I forgot to mention it in pre-show, but I thought it'd be good to have it come out with this episode because of Christmas. So and Mark did a great job on it. We went through many different iterations, and I think where we ended up is a nice, elegant design, but within theme, and is way better than what we've had. So thank you so much, Mark, for our Christmas present. Really appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you for that. For the additional work this week, it's good to have the week off. I've had any number of weeks off. Thanks again for that review, Tylenardo, and for the email, Billy /the second quest to devgameclub@gmail.com. Thanks for all of that. We really appreciate it. You can find us on the web at www.devgameclub.com.
Oh boy.
And on Twitter at devgameclub. You can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton and commissioned by friend of the cast, Aaron Evers. Have so much fun running around, putting on masks, and scaring your friends this week. And good night.
Good night.